Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guests on this next interview. Now, as Germany transitions into a new parliamentary term, Chancellor Olaf Scholz and his cabinet have formally stepped down, prompting a fresh wave of political negotiations and shifting alliances in Berlin. With critical policy divides, especially on migration, social spending, and military support for Ukraine, Germany's domestic and foreign policy directions hang in the balance. Joining us today on TVP World to unpack the implications is Mattia Nelles, CEO of the German-Ukrainian Bureau. As a seasoned expert on Eastern Europe and Ukraine, Nelles has advised policymakers across Germany and Ukraine and brings us deep understanding of the internal dynamics shaping Berlin's stance towards Kyiv. So, hello and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you for having me.
So when we are looking at the newly constituted Bundestag, of course, we do understand that there will be a lot of political horse trading and a lot of coalition building going forward. But I want to also tap into your expertise when it comes to Ukraine. And if you can help us break down, what do you think the new German coalition's stance towards Ukraine is going to be?
So the new German government has yet to be formed. We have a majority of the Conservatives together with the Social Democrats of only 12 votes. So that's, for German standards, a small majority, and they're still in coalition talks. But when it comes to Ukraine, we're expecting Germany to step up and finally join the coalition of the willing. And as you know, and your Polish viewers and around the world have noticed that Germany has been missing in action when it comes to Ukraine for the past half a year, more or less. The German government has been bickering, internal infights have been plaguing it. So we're now looking at a new German government led by a much stronger chancellor who comes in saying we need to do whatever it takes on German defense and we need to help Ukraine much stronger. And now Ukrainians are, of course, asking to see the deliverables, to see how the Ukraine aid from Germany and Europe are ramped up at this critical juncture.
Right. When it comes to Friedrich Merz, we do know that he did flip-flop on a little bit of his stance, especially when it comes to the economic side of things and the debt break before he's running on a more fiscally conservative platform, which has shifted since he was elected. Do you think that the same pattern is also going to occur when it comes to his stand towards Ukraine, or do you believe that this is going to be a relatively stable stance going forward?
So Friedrich Merz has been campaigning on a more fiscally conservative stance, but of course, since taking over, the world has dramatically changed. We saw the end of the Pax Americana. We saw America not just turning away from Ukraine, but aggressively pivoting away towards Russia and away from Europe proper. So that Merz really recognized and said the answer to that can only be more European security, can be Germans together with the Europeans providing more security to Ukraine. And the reform of the debt break is part of that. It's the only way for Germans to pay more for our own self-defense, invest more in our own infrastructure, is to reform the debt break. And it's a flip-flop in his position, but his voters seem to believe him that this is sincere. And this is due to the changed geopolitical context. So that the aggressive Trump stance has changed the entire German political spectrum. And that's good news for Europe and frankly for Ukraine, that Germany is now willing to step up and lead together with its European partners where it has been missing for the past half a year.
Right. And speaking of deliverables, there was, of course, an ongoing discussions about sending Taurus missiles to Ukraine. Do you think that this new government will have some sort of political momentum backing that?
I sincerely hope so, but it's not just about one missile system or one weapon system, because if you look at the numbers that Germany has, we're talking about a few dozen that Germany could send. And these, if you narrow it down to only Taurus deliveries, that won't make a difference. I hope that the system will come, but we need to talk about, transitioning away from piecemeal support to a long-term structural support of the Ukrainian armed forces. And we see the majority of German support now comes from industry contracts, and that's good news. But we need to ramp up these contracts, both for our own army and for the Ukrainian army. So we need to talk about how do we provide infantry fighting vehicles, long-term contracts. German industry can help with the drone production in Ukraine, investing into Ukraine's domestic arms industry. And these are all things that Germany needs to do. So we need to talk beyond one weapon system and look and how we, with our German and European financial means, can support Ukraine's defense industry, and our own defense industry helping Ukraine.
Right, and you also mentioned earlier that this, of course, coalition forming process have its own bickering and its divides within as well. Of course, things are not going to be as smooth and easy as, well, it turns out to be. Do you think that some of these political divisions, especially when it's persisting over the Ukraine policy, might surface later on? It does seem like people are rather unified right now, but do you foresee any bifurcation farther down the line?
Of course, there will be political bickering and infighting that's inherent to German or to politics in general. But as of now, we see unity on Ukraine among the coalition negotiations. There's little we know about the details yet, but we know that there's unity on the broader question of supporting Ukraine. So I think the controversial issues, I mean, you mentioned them earlier, are more regarding taxes, are more also, when it comes to Ukraine, only regarding the Ukrainian refugees in Germany. There's a contentious issue whether they should receive full German social benefits or not. And the conservatives under Merz really want to push them out of the same social benefits that Germans currently enjoy and to push them into the labor market more quickly and more aggressively. And the Social Democrats are pushing against that. But broadly speaking, there will be 10 contentious issues. But with regards to foreign policy in Ukraine, we see a rather united future coalition as of now.
One of the big talking points, or well, one of the very contentious issue is the migration policy within Germany, and that has been dominating a lot of the political talks. You mentioned earlier, though, there's also the issue with the Ukrainian refugees. Do you think there's a risk of these two relatively same-sounding concept being bundled together?
There is a certain risk, but people are aware that there are differences between illegal migrants, those coming from faraway places and committing crimes here on German soil, and the Ukrainians who are fleeing war. And so even the hardliners among the CDU, they are saying Ukrainians can stay in Germany, but they should be integrated into the labor market more quickly. So they're not to be confused with asylum seekers who commit crimes, and Germany was unable to deport them before they could commit the crimes or even after. So I would say that the issues are separate, but there is growing pressure on the Ukraine portfolio when it comes to domestic politics to really move them and push Ukrainians more into the labor markets, because we're looking at 700,000 Ukrainians who are, as of now, enjoying the social benefits, and they're struggling. It's really, I want to emphasize, struggling with the German labor market because the requirements to enter are so high. So we need to speak both of pushing them and also incentivizing, helping them to join the labor market, and really hope that the right balance can be found between stick and carrots.
Right. And like you mentioned, of course, the coalition building exercise is still ongoing. But do you think this internal reshuffling will influence its credibility, like internationally going forward? Like I mentioned, perhaps Merz is going to be seen as a stronger leader going forward compared to the previous government?
Absolutely. So we are looking at a German government that is likely going to come into office after Easter. So the German Bundestag is being formed later this month, next week, and then the German government a few weeks down the line. But the new government comes in under Merz with a strong mandate. Even though the majority is slim, Europe has been waiting. Geopolitics hasn't waited, but the Europeans have waited for Germany with a stronger mandate, with an ability to act. With a reformed debt brake, Germany can really step up and deliver on its promise that it will. And we have been, quite frankly, sleeping through decades of geopolitical wake-up calls, and this government has indicated that they are willing to step up, and we're now really measuring them against their deeds and not their words. And Europeans' expectations are sky high when it comes to the Merz government, but they understood this, and I hope that they can deliver.
And do you think that the new German government will see itself as the leader of EU defense?
They certainly do. So Merz has said that we need to invest not just more in German defense, but also in European defense, together with Poland and France and the UK, to organize our European defense markets. And when you look at the European Union, not just take common debt, which the government is, quite frankly, the incoming government is quite skeptical of, joint bonds, but they really focus on how do we create a European single market for defense? How do we harmonize these defense standards, which is needed, which is a requirement for more joint procurement in the light of the Russian aggression. So I think when it comes to defense, you're looking at a German government which understands the necessity looks at the problem and is willing to provide some of the answers in lockstep with the European institutions led by some very good people who've also understood the issue, from von der Leyen to Defense Commissioner Kubilius. So there is German leadership coming.
Great. Thank you so much for your input and insight and breaking all of that down for us. Really appreciate it. And thanks for being with us on TVP World.
Thank you for having me.
Cheers. And thank you for tuning into this edition of World Talks. For more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.